Oh, Blackhawks fans, welcome to a brand new edition of the Four Feathers podcast. It is long overdue to talk hockey here at Four Feathers, but we are back. A 42nd head coach in team history is the subject matter for tonight's show. I'm Ron Luce. You all know me. I am GM Ron. I am joined by Tony Marchese and Steve. Gentlemen, you're just Steve, by the way. There's no other introduction needed. Just Steve.
Just Steve.
Boys, how are we doing? How we feeling? Happy Thursday. Weekend starts on Thursday. Cheers. Crack them.
Yes, it does. Cheers.
For all those watching
Cheers.
at home. How are we feeling? Keep hockey thoughts. Hold them back. Just emotionally speaking, how you doing?
Well, for me personally, it's Friday's Eve, so I cannot wait for this week to end. It's been a long day at work for me, so and then couple that with the coaching news, which we'll get into. But I'm doing all right. I can't complain.
We like that. No complaints is usually a good thing. Anthony?
I've got a very shitty baseball team that I watch all the time. I'm very happy to be back on these airwaves. I'm a little upset with you, Ronald, but that's
Me?
you.
Me?
You said some not so nice things over at the Cubs on Tap episode.
No, I didn't say White Sox fans were inferior and meant nothing, and one letter in their team name changes them to sucks. I didn't say any of that.
Yeah, well, we'll roll the tape at some point. But I'm doing good. We got a long weekend coming up. It's Memorial Day weekend. We can start wearing our red, white, and blue stuff on the golf course, Ron. It's
red, white, and black.
Red, white, and black. But yeah, it's Friday Eve, as Steve said, and I'm ready to talk some Blackhawks hockey. It feels good to be back on these airwaves. I just got done with the Sox on Tap. It feels like I haven't been on a podcast in forever, so this feels good. Glad to be back on with you guys. How are you doing, Ronald?
I'm doing great. I've been very dialed into baseball as well, just like you, Mr. Marchese.
Yeah, you got a good baseball team.
We do have a good baseball team on the north side. It's a lot of fun to watch. If you ever want to come watch them, you let me know. But we're having fun. And but I'll tell you what, though, I've been craving talking hockey for far too long. We have other subject matters other than our meat and potatoes of tonight's episode that we will get to because we are long overdue to discuss such topics. But as mentioned, we are here to discuss the 42nd head coach in Chicago Blackhawks history. Officially, even though this was the worst kept secret in the NHL for the last probably at least 72 hours, if not longer, Jeff Blashill is now the head coach officially as of Thursday, May 22nd. So he will replace Anders Sorensen, who will remain on the staff. We can certainly get into some of the assistant coaching as well. Pekka, assistant coach from the Rangers, played center for a long time in the NHL. He is joining as an assistant, and there is one other name in the mix who is considered a finalist for the final assistant job. No more Kevin Dean. He is now gone as a part of this. So that is some of the additional news and notes that come with the news that Jeff Blashill moves from one original 6 team as a head coach via the Tampa Bay Lightning to another, once Red Wings head coach, now Chicago Blackhawks head coach. I think we just open the floor to raw reactions because, gentlemen, I was in the process of putting a little piece together that'll be available for everybody at ontapsportsnet.com, and that one's just a little more me in my own head. I'm excited to hear from you and bounce ideas off of you guys about kind of what's been said and what to think and what to make of everything right now. But just to begin, raw, spur of the moment feeling, I guess not even when it became official, but more when it was hinted at, because I feel like that's when it started to feel real. What went through your head? What's going through your guys' head? Hockey and analysis necessarily be damned. Just where is your space at as a fan of this team?
Steve, you want me to take it? It doesn't matter to me. It's to you.
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
Pretty quick, but I think just like raw emotion wise, a little underwhelming, to be honest. And like, I know it's not like the NFL, like where the Bears, they did I think a really good job at broadcasting like the whole interview process. And I didn't expect that to come from the Blackhawks, but it was pretty quiet. So once we saw that name other than David Carl, where we saw Blashill's name get leaked, that's when I kind of started getting a little worried that this might be the guy. And sure enough, that's who it was. And I don't think we'll know who the other names really were in the running for, but yeah, to be honest, just kind of not even just whelmed, not even really underwhelmed, just whelmed.
Just whelmed.
That's a very
oddly kind of perfect in a lot of ways. Tony, what would you build off of how Steve feels? Are you in agreement or feeling a little different?
It's funny. I'll hit you guys with something in the post show with the whelmed thing, but my initial thoughts on this, I wasn't in on Carl as much as you guys were, and I don't know why. Maybe it's just I don't watch as much college hockey, or I don't know. There's something about David Carl just didn't feel like it was going to fit with this team. It seemed like it was almost one of those things where it was like too perfect of a scenario, where like this guy fits all the wants. What's the catch? And the catch is he wanted to stay where he was at. So there's always like one thing that doesn't work out. I'm only a couple of days removed from saying we're one day closer to Anders Sorensen becoming the head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks again, or being officially named. And that was sort of the direction that I thought we were going to go with this after David Carl was removed from the situation, or took his name out of consideration. I thought that, I felt myself getting more and more comfortable with an Anders Sorensen, like being named the permanent head coach, where at this moment, like any other name that was out there was going to probably make me somewhat happy. And I kind of look at this just immediately off the bat. This is a guy that's been through some development with another team, good developing guy, like good at least someone who's been through the process of a rebuild, someone who's developed kids at the youth level that have made it up there, won, minor league type cups and championships and everything. So there's some success, there's some pedigree there, and it's not Anders Sorensen. And I think that there's something to be said with how frustrated we were just a month ago coming out of the end of that season to like where my mind started to justify things just because the Hawks couldn't land their 1A target. I think that a lot of people may, and the reaction is sort of out there. Now I want to get into sort of the public reaction to this at some point, but the reaction out there, it seems whelmed, as Steve says, it seems whelmed. But for me, I guess like my initial reaction to it when it started to get leaked and rumored was, okay, it's not Anders Sorensen. At least they took a look outside of the organization and thought sort of outside the box instead of just sticking with what's comfortable. And I think that on a really small scale, but maybe a larger scale, when you really start to peel back the layers, that was needed. Mm-hmm. And I watched some stuff over the past couple of days that I'll get into later in the episode that really affirmed that, hey, getting outside of this organization and going and finding someone who is not a first-time coach might benefit this current group of players. That's my initial thought.
I'll tell you what, Tone. I largely feel I think I feel overall probably how you guys are feeling, and I think that'll relate to kind of that public discussion that we can get into. But to me, I think right now, especially after Luke Richardson, I'm not saying Luke Richardson was necessarily a failure. I don't really know how to define Luke Richardson. I feel like it was a bad situation with the wrong candidate, maybe. Luke Richardson might go on to be a decent NHL head coach someday. He might have been the right coach, but maybe not at the right time for that version of the Blackhawks. So I'm kind of I'm in the boat of I'm going to be very patient with this. I'm going to take a step back, and I'll react more at a later date. But I'll look at the facts, and I'll look at the information, and I'll absorb that and start to maybe more form questions that I have entering the season rather than opinions on how I guess I truly feel about it. Because right now I feel like, to your point, Tone, I think there's a lot to be said for not not doing the same thing you did when hiring Richardson, but also not doing the one thing I think every fan from the Blackhawks did not want to see. And that was the recycling of just these washed up old head coaches that are just, it's time to move on. Tortorella, names of that nature. Hell, even maybe a little bit of Laviolette. Maybe Laviolette gets a couple years off before he gets another look. Not having those guys is good. And I think every Blackhawks fan would agree with that. That was not going to be the right move for this team. Well, look how it blew up in Philadelphia with Tortorella. But they also didn't go, hey, we're going to go full-blown first-time head coach. They wanted to go that way, right? They wanted to go that way with David Carl. And I think it was because of Carl felt like the right fit because of how well he did with young players. And like you said, Tom, maybe the match was a little too perfect. And he was like, you know what? I'm going to stay and all is fine and whatever. And then they said, you know what? Of what's left, because that's also the other thing everybody has to remember. It's not like you can just magically go pluck people from anywhere. You're not getting other NHL head coaches. Either you're getting assistants or you're getting guys from lower levels. That's pretty much what it's at that point. Or fired head coaches, right? Mike Sullivan, who immediately signed with New York as soon as Pittsburgh said goodbye. Thank you for your service. They didn't go that direction. So then instead they looked around and went, what could happen? Right? There was a lot of smoke and mirrors, maybe fan base generated. I talked a little bit about this in the article that's going to be coming out. Maybe it was John Cooper was of interest once Carl dried up. If he had gotten fired by the Lightning, but they said, no, we're going to keep him. Well, who was on his bench? Jeff Blashill. Maybe there is the sense of, hey, give him another shot. Maybe he didn't get a fair shake in Detroit the first time around, but he has 7 years of head coaching experience in the NHL and had a lot of success prior to his time in the NHL. He was a Calder Cup champion in the AHL with the Griffins, in Grand Rapids. And then he was a Clark Cup champion in the USHL days. He knows John Cooper. He's kind of a John Cooper lineage guy of sorts. Maybe this was, hey, of who's really available right now, maybe he's not the guy to be the champion head coach. Maybe he is. We don't know. But he's at least the guy that probably can take this team from where they currently stand to let's go, really get after it and give ourselves a chance. And maybe more on that later. But that's kind of how I'm approaching it. And I think my raw reaction was just kind of like, interesting name choice. Haven't heard that name in a while. What could lead up to it? So I took a little bit more of a curiosity route maybe than a reactionary route. But I think whelmed is a good way to put it. Because I think he kind of came out of left field for a lot of people. And that's kind of what the public reaction also feels like, right? It's like, Jeff Blashill? Jeff Blashill? Like that Jeff Blashill?
Playoffs?
He's still around.
Jeff Blashill?
Playoffs. He's still around. I think a lot of people just kind of forgot about Blashill, not necessarily in a bad way, but he stepped back into an assistant coaching role. But it's almost like the situations that you see sometimes in other sports, right? First-time head coach, maybe doesn't have the right success, goes back with like a mentor or somebody like that who they believed in, or what they were kind of a tree of. Bill Parcells was even like that with Belichick back in the day. And then, okay, now you're ready to go off and give it another try. Go dip your foot in the water. See what happens.
Yeah, so what you're saying is the next time Matt Nagy gets hired as a
head coach, more or less. Hey, I don't feel negative. I don't feel as negatively about Matt Nagy anymore that I used to. So,
I was just trying to draw some comparison, and for some reason that one.
No, I think that's a sort of comparison.
I really sort of fit there. Like, if you look at the Kansas City Chiefs right now, you look at where the Bears were, that's another name that might pop back up there sometime.
Definitely.
But I think a lot of people would forget about Matt Nagy unless you were, because I've been on the Reddit boards with the Detroit Red Wings fans, and a lot of people had a lot of really positive things to say. And there's also some people out there that are like, fuck that guy. So that tells me that there's some sort of discourse and things that, maybe the really tuned in fan who thought, one way or the other really places that blame on a guy like Jeff Blashill in that organization. Because, you're not going to get the full story out of one single fan. You got to kind of look across the board here. But that's I sort of threw that out there. Ron, the one thing that I've got a question though from your initial thoughts is you said you're gonna sort of be curious about this. You're gonna be patient with it. I don't think that the Chicago Blackhawk fan base is going to be very patient with Jeff Blashill, and I think that you're going to get a different tone set from day one, where not a lot of people are going to give him the benefit of the doubt as much as you probably would have with a David Carl. So I think that it's almost like you're going to be swimming uphill a little bit if you're Jeff Blashill. I don't think this is going to be an easy thing to step into.
I don't think it is either, but I think it's a welcomed challenge for Blashill. And I think the pressure that he'll feel this time around as a head coach is not negative pressure. So if you look at his tenure in Detroit, he had 1 year of playoff appearance, and that was his first year as head coach. Babcock left for Toronto, and he takes over after being the AHL head coach for 3 years, 3 deep playoff runs, quarterfinals, semifinals, and championship in 3 years. And walks in with an aging core that squeaks into the playoffs, doesn't do anything. They lose in 5 games. And then all those old guys retire, and he's in a wasteland for probably about his first 4 years. He was there for 5. They give him a 2-year extension. He sees that through. So he was there for 7 years, but they never were starting to build back up because then the GM changed. Holland was out. Yzerman came in to take over his old team. And one of the first things he did was kick Blashill to the side. That's negative pressure because he was the Luke Richardson for Detroit, kind of the scapegoat who was there when they were on the decline and still declining before they could really ascend. Blashill's getting here at a time where it's not going to be a rocket ship ascent, but it's going to be a slight takeoff like you're leaving O'Hare rather than Midway, right? They're going to start to improve. The best thing for him to keep the job in Chicago is for players like Bedard, Nazar, Levshinov, Renzel, all of them to take a noticeable step forward this year. And if they start playing anything close to more than competent hockey come February, March, there's going to be a lot more excitement kind of going into that second year. And we won't know the term for his contract. I think coaching contracts not being reported term-wise is the stupidest fucking thing on earth, by the way. I don't know if anybody else agrees with that. I think it's dumb. But he's probably going to get at least, what did Richard can get? 3 with an option for 4. I think he could get something comparable. If there's excitement going into year 2, I think he gets that 4th-year option and at least gets a chance to get this team potentially into a playoff picture rather than Dennis Savard, where it was like build up. Oh, they're ready to go win. Go get Quenneville now. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. I know that's a crazy huge tirade, but to put it in a sense of like the pressure for Blashill, I think is going to be good because it's pressure with the understanding that this team's ready to begin ascending rather than going the other way.
Yeah, and it's going to be a slow ascent too. So I think a lot of fans need to remember that even though there's going to be better expectations going into the season, that there's still going to be growing pains. This roster is still young. This is the whole reason why they went after Blashill, is because they want a coach who can work with young players, which means a lot of learning is going to be occurring on the ice. So I think a lot of fans need to also tamper their expectations where it's, you don't want it to be as bad as it was this year by any means. Like that would be horrible. But to say that we're going to be like sniffing the playoffs is going to be quite the stretch. So I think Blackhawks fans just need to kind of remember where we are and give Blashill a chance to at least make it throughout the year, because like you guys were saying, we don't really know what to expect from him. Not even like from day one. Like, and what I've been seeing a lot of negativity is like a lot of fans saying that this was a horrible hire, and like we can't just make those bold proclamations like this early on. Like we just got him.
I think the only proclamation that can truly be made that would have been a bad hire would have been like one of those old coaches getting recycled.
Yes.
I think that's where it really stands. He's only had one shot in the NHL so far. He was on Cooper's bench. It's not like he was on the bench in Buffalo or on the bench in some middling, terrible team. He's on a good bench over there in Tampa, right? Like, not every guy is the fast rising coach. I think a good example of that, a guy that goes under the radar, but I had an awesome pleasure of getting to interview him quite a few times. Ryan Warsofsky over in San Jose. He came up quickly through the AHL with the Wolves, gets onto the bench in San Jose as an assistant. He's promoted to head coach. Not everybody's that quick ascender. Blashill went the other direction. He's always been kind of a Cooper friend, colleague of sorts. They took the same kind of career path, USHL to AHL to NHL. But he went and worked with his buddy Coop for 3 years, learned a lot in 7 years as a head coach, and then got to refine things. I mean, he's a decade removed from being a head coach for the first time. That's a lot of NHL experience that could be very beneficial for him in a second time around. And again, a lot of it's also going to dictate how the team develops. He had no success in Detroit because the team didn't develop. A lot of their talent didn't work out, right? Thomas Jurko. Do we all remember Thomas Jurko, the top prospect for the Detroit Red Wings, who became a friggin' fourth liner for the Hawks for like 26 games for 2 years? He was supposed to be a big piece of the franchise. Justin Abdelkader was never supposed to get hurt and get sick and never play hockey again. Dylan Larkin developed. Mort Seider developed, but there wasn't a lot of high upside players on the roster. This is in my opinion, a very different situation than what Detroit was in when Blashill got the job initially. Give him a chance. What's the worst thing that happens? Your team's ascending. You got hopefully good young talent developing and taking that next step, and you fire them and you go get somebody who's ready to help you win. Somebody will want to take the job. For them, the key is just continuing to develop talent. And he's a guy that's worked with enough youth where he's going to give them every opportunity in the world to develop talent. And that's all the name of the game is about right now. Eventually, that talent's going to be good enough to get you to the playoffs, as long as you keep developing it and getting it to that next level.
Exactly. And we got to remember, too, he was with Detroit for a while. And you guys were referencing him as kind of like Detroit's Luke Richardson. Richardson only lasted two full seasons, and then on the third year he got canned. So, I say that because Blashill he has a lot of experience, and while he was coaching a rebuilding team, that gave him the opportunity to try new stuff because they're rebuilding, they're going to be losing. And now I kind of segue that into my only true concern about Blashill that I've seen so far is when he was the head coach, he was very insistent on a defensive first system. And for me personally, I think Connor Bedard, he needs to be unlocked offensively by being allowed to cheat in the defensive zone. And Scott Powers from The Athletic, he was kind of writing about how Blashill doesn't like players cheating in the defensive zone. So I guess we'll just kind of have to see how that goes, because, on the other hand of that is, if you're watching the playoffs right now, Florida is absolutely killing it with a strong defense. So if that's what it takes to win, sure, why the hell not? But I do want to see Bedard take that next step and be the goal scorer we all thought he's going to be. So, yeah.
I will say this on that note, and another fun venture I've gone down in the last 24 hours was Wally Masaryk. I think a lot of Blackhawks fans that listen to our show know who he is on X. Found an awesome YouTube video from USA Hockey of Blashill doing a clinic and talking hockey mentality and kind of how he teaches the game, which to me is at least a little bit of a key unlocking to his system, right? We don't get the X's and O's per se, but we get the fundamental basics of what he's expecting, what he values in terms of how his players play, kind of a little bit of the philosophy, for example. So I'm slapping together and putting my little coaching hat on and trying to digest that as a fan and what that could mean. But I think the defensive first system that he's looking for, it's not so much defense first of always value defense. It's about supporting players more than it is about defense. Like that's what he approaches. It's team support. And what that means is just always give your guys, he really preaches the 5-foot pass. He's like, give your guy a two-way go with a 5-foot pass. So he just expects if a D-man's got a puck, know your options. You've got D2 over here, and the center, who's usually F1, Steve. Anybody that reads any of your recaps knows for sure what we're talking about, is the support guy to help be that pivot with the passes. In my opinion, Connor Bedard is best when he's always touching the puck. Frank Nazar is best when he's always touching the puck. So to me, that system could benefit those players because there's play-driving centers who can then push it up to the wingers. I think Bedard is best in those situations. And if Bedard's getting support and good support because your team's developing, you're putting more talent around him, that support's going to create problems for the defense, which is then in turn going to free up Bedard. So I think everybody's looking at it all wrong. When you have the wrong personnel, yeah, it's a defensive first because you got to make up for a lot of mistakes. There was only one Dylan Larkin on that team. They didn't have two centers that could stretch the ice and really generate play. Quick passes with speed and get out into space on breakouts. He also loves D-men getting involved on the breakout. That's going to favor players like Artem Levshinov, Sam Renzel, maybe even Alex Vlasic, who's really his offensive game, I think, has come a long way. It's going to value those guys getting into the zone. So, like, I understand people's concern, I think, because of what they think Luke Richardson when they hear defensive first system. But a lot of those defensive first systems, if you have the talent in them, it's more so about supporting your players than it is playing defense first. Because if you're supporting with efficient passes, it's just giving that talent chances to break out and use your athleticism rather than when you're down and you maybe don't have great athletes on the ice, you have to settle in and get more conservative in that. But he wants to play through the middle of the ice. Like Nazar's great through the middle of the ice. Connor Bedard's going to get better as more talents around him through the middle of the ice. Hell, I would even make the argument players like Ryan Green and Tyler Bertuzzi. Some of these guys are pretty good through the middle of the ice. Teuvo Teravainen with the quick pass. He's the king of the 5-foot pass. I think this team might be a little more inclined to play that system more efficiently. And you have to think, he even also talked about his big thing is it's like pretty much grab and go is what he says in terms of like stealing concepts from other people and then using them. Who's to say he doesn't take some concepts from Cooper and refine his system a little bit? I don't think it's going to be black and white to what he did in Detroit. I think there's going to be a lot of gray involved because of new things he's learned with being on Cooper's bench for 3 years as well. And I realize this just took a really super nerdy turn. But that's some of the research. I think that's some of the curiosity that I've had over the last couple of days is really trying to learn what he's preaching. And we're not going to know everything. We're not going to know 100% of it. But to me, that's a lot of the big things I see with him. You know, it's the idea. Think about it like the solar system. The puck is the sun. Hear me out, Tony. You're going to love this. Hear me out. Every planet has moons orbiting them, right? As they're orbiting the sun. The idea is support. So you're moving in little orbits around the ice where you have 3 guys that you can do 2 quick passes and get out and break out. So it looks like a little cartoon of just these guys like spinning around on little like arcade games. But that's the type of style. Like if I had to draw a picture of what I believe his style is,
wait.
That's what it is. I can't
fucking wait to clip that. Think of it like this.
But like, think about it. Sit back and honestly think about it. His big thing, right? It's okay. If the D's going in, he calls them shoulder checks. It's know where your passes are before you get the puck. Okay, I'm going back. I got a guy over here. I got a guy back here. That's my two-way go. Those are my 2 guys that are supporting me. They're moving with me up the ice, just like a moon would move with a planet around the sun. And they're there. They're bailout, right? Boom, boom, 1, 2. He's big about quick skating work, guys being elite and able to avoid contact. That's a lot of kind of what he preaches in the thing. It's a great listen. If anybody can stand super nerdy coaching talk for like an hour, go listen to it because I think it's awesome. Starts at about the 15-minute mark in the video, and it's the most beautiful nerdy hockey thing I've ever watched in my entire life. And I genuinely enjoyed it. But I think it gave me a really good understanding of what we're going to see on the ice come October.
That's why you listen to That's why you listen to Four Feathers podcast when we go live at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night, because you get Ron Luce on here comparing hockey to the solar system. Man, you just got me high on the Hawks just listening to you there for a hot minute, Ron. Steve, I'll turn it back over to you because you looked like you had something to respond to Ron with.
I don't remember because his breakdown of how moons orbit planets kind of threw me for a loop. But one thing I noticed was Tyler Bertuzzi, he had his best season underneath Blashill. So I don't know if that means anything, but he scored 62 points in the 21-22 season. So who knows? And
There's
I think
only 30 goal season.
That's a really good point. I don't know if anybody else. I haven't seen that anywhere on X today.
I will say I did hear that from Charlie Romeliotis on a Breakaway podcast. So I think that triggered me looking into that. So I don't want to take credit for that one, but
hey, Charlie's a great guy.
Yeah.
Charlie is great.
He's got great hair. I envy it very much.
But it's funny you bring that up, Steve, because that was actually something in my little fadeaway reactions piece I'm writing, was talking about Bertuzzi, and more in the sense of he had a lot of success under Blashill. He knows what Blashill's going to expect. So if there's any player that Blashill can use to be the example, not in a bad way, like, yo, you're in trouble in class, I'm going to make you an example, but hey guys,
could he be wearing an A next year?
I don't think so. I don't think he's going to wear an A. I think the leadership group in that locker room is pretty set. And I think that's an organizational thing more than it is just a coaching thing. In my opinion, what Bertuzzi is going to be able to do is, especially for some of the young guys, because remember, Bertuzzi has 3 more years after this one because he signed that 4-year contract. You only got 2 more at Tavo. You only got 1 more of a lot of the other veterans. Bertuzzi's going to be the guy, hey, Frank, think about this when you're going up the ice here because, you're going to have this look. Bertuzzi saw that system for the first 4 or 5 years of his career. That's what he knew coming out of AHL hockey. He won a Calder, I believe he won a Calder Cup with Blashill. I think they were both on that same Grand Rapids team when they were down there. Bertuzzi knows what it's like to play in Blashill's system. I bet you 100% if we get 20 games into the season and this Blackhawks team is kind of looking like, wow, they're kind of fun and way better than last year. Don't be surprised if guys start bringing up Bertuzzi as he's the mouth kind of between the players and the coach of he's almost another coach on the ice just because he knows what's going on and what's going to be expected, having spent, the first multiple seasons of his career playing for Blashill. Tyler Bertuzzi shows up a lot of the drill videos and Blashill's little USA hockey spiel as well. I was watching that because I was like, oh, there's Tyler Bertuzzi running around the ice.
Oh yeah, and I just checked too. So Bertuzzi was not on that team. So Bertuzzi played for the Griffins starting in 2014, and then they won the championship in the 2012-13 season.
Okay.
And
so Bertuzzi had 1 year under Blashill in the AHL before he made the jump.
Yep, and he only played 2 games under him.
Oh, okay. So he probably signed out of juniors then. Is probably what ended up happening.
Exactly, yeah.
And then once he got to Detroit, obviously Blashill was up there. So okay.
Yep.
Thank you for that clarification, Steve. I appreciate that.
Of course.
But yeah, I think there's a lot to be said. And maybe that's just kind of my 2 cents. Maybe the Blackhawks fans is hey, sit back and just think through this. This is about putting young guys in a good position. He's worked with a ton of young guys. Sure, are we not wowed by it? Yeah, but sometimes that's okay. You don't have to always be wowed by a coaching hire.
The weird thing to me, guys, and I don't know if you've each personally experienced this since, I guess, the rumor started, not so much that it's been official. But it feels to me, just watching through the day, that I've seen more people talk about the negative reaction to this from hockey opinions that I trust, that say, no, this is okay, than the negative reaction on the other side, even though it might be the louder mass. But there's a lot of people in the hockey community that are like, this is a decent hire. And it's not just like local to Chicago. I'm talking like external, national people who are in Detroit. But I'm not saying that it's going to work out. I'm just saying that I feel like people were sort of either A, hung up on Carl being the coach, or bust.
100%.
That it's almost like you don't want to put yourself in that position to like root against a guy. And I feel like you're crossing that sort of line right now in some certain circles, where you're almost actively rooting for whatever's going on here to fail, rather than giving it its time. That said, because I have to play devil's advocate, I do think that despite there being reason to like have hope and for, giving him his chance. And Steve, you prefaced this earlier. You're like, it's going to take a couple of years. It's going to be a slow ascent. I still think those same problems are the same reason that you don't have Luke Richardson entering next year as your head coach. This is not an environment with the Chicago Blackhawks right now where people are patient. There is not a lot of patience with the Blackhawks fan base. And I think both of you guys can agree with that. Mm-hmm. I'm not exceptionally patient, and I don't think either of you guys are either. You look at the hire and you evaluate it. He's going to be here all year unless something catastrophic happens. You're at least guaranteed 1 year of Jeff Blashill. So why try and run him out of town before the Hawks have played their first game?
Right. And I think
underneath his tutelage, it doesn't make any sense to me.
I think you bring up a great point, and that kind of almost applies to Kyle Davidson too, because we've been seeing more of the fan base.
It does apply to Kyle Davidson, because I feel like, and I think you would agree with this, Steve, because we've had this conversation, maybe that wasn't the right time to fire Luke Richardson.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Where I'm getting with it is like for Davidson's seat, I don't think that's going to be warm for quite a while. So even if this season they like just completely drop the ball again, I think maybe that gets Davidson's seats warm. But to be honest, like if you've read Danny Wirtz's interviews, he doesn't sound terribly surprised with what's going on. He seems pretty patient. He seems like he's willing to give Davidson like a extra leash to kind of learn on the go almost. And for the Blackhawks fans, like it seems like even through the past 2 years, attendance has been pretty good. So people are still showing up, and that's huge with Chicago, because before the Cups, like we all can remember the absence of Blackhawks.
It was
hockey.
bad.
Mm-hmm. I think we could all sit here and agree on something, and I think it's an important thing to bring up at this juncture, Steve, because I think you said it perfectly. There were a lot of people that expected the United Center attendance to absolutely bottom out this year. Yep. And while there were games, Ron, we were in attendance for some that were not so well attended. And when I say not so well attended, it was still like 14 to 16K.
Yeah, it was still like...
That's not the dark days that people were anticipating. I think people were anticipating, and I'll throw my own team under the bus, the Chicago White Sox kind of level of attendance, where you've got the old dark days prior to the Cups, where you would see maybe 5,000 or 6,000 in the United Center. And that never happened. It never bottomed out. People were still there. So I think that there would be a lot more pressure on the organization to force change if that did happen. From a logistical standpoint, I think there's definitely reason for people to be upset with the way the team's marketed, the way the team has performed, to put pressure on everything. But Chicago, and this is where I'm going with this, Chicago has become a hockey city.
Most definitely.
And it always has been, but it has really become a hockey, like a hockey hub. And that's why you get the Winter Classic in Chicago. That's why you fill Wrigley Field. That's why people are so invested in this. However, I think it doesn't put the onus on the ownership group and Danny Wirtz to make changes effectively, because when there's money rolling in, and Ron, you know this because you're a Cubs fan, when there's money rolling in and people show up all the time, what tells the ownership group that they need to change or spend more money? Because people are going to be there because they enjoy the product. And you can water it down all you want if people keep showing up. And so I feel like we're at that weird pace where, like, is Blackhawks fandom turning into sort of that same trajectory? No, they're not the Bears. No, they're not the Cubs. But people are showing up to Hawks games at a higher rate than they are some of the other teams that aren't owned by Jerry Reinsdorf. Wow, I found a common denominator right there.
Wow.
Hey, wow. We're doing some late night math. But I do feel, Steve, that you really hit the nail on the head. People are showing up.
Yeah,
but there's a dark side to that. There is a very dark side to that leads to not so good things. And while they might not celebrate the Cup teams the way that they should, all those fans are still there.
And you don't even have to look up to the north side to see people showing up for a bad team. I personally don't know why they would go to Wrigley Field other than how it looks, but it's another discussion. But a newsletter that I read a lot from Sam Fells is he was looking at the Bulls. Like, people still show up to Bulls games, like, ever since the 90s. Like after that whole championship run, like, people still show up to Bulls games. I haven't watched the Bulls in a while, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were leading attendance in the entire league. So
they're up there. Yeah, they're always up there.
And that's kind of what scares me, where, like, yes, now we're a hockey city, which is great and it's awesome, but people are going to keep coming. So now there is no pressure from ownership, because really at the end of the day, it's a business. And if they're still getting that money, then they can just be patient. Even if they want to win, they're still getting money. So they're going to play the long game and be patient. I think that's just the reality of the business side of sports, which is it's an entertainment business.
Yeah, 100%.
I love this kind of discussion.
Yeah, you always love to be devil's advocate.
No, I mean, I'm not trying to be devil's advocate. I'm actually agreeing with Steve. And I don't think that I don't think fans particularly lean into that, because, I mean, Jerry Reinsdorf was crucified for going on, I forget whose show it was, and talking about how, like, the business of sports works. It is an entertainment business. And if you're a diehard fan who gets in there and goes into the analytics, and Ron, you probably know this from doing all the Bear shows and talking with Q, like, people are going to tune in. They're going to listen. They're going to want to dissect all these things. But where's the pressure to move forward until people start to get fed up with something? And I feel like a lot of people expected that the Hawks were going to reach that, but they effectively removed two franchise icons in Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves in a relatively short time, won a lottery, received Connor Bedard in exchange for luck, and you're right back at it where everybody's energized. And now I think the Blackhawks franchise is sitting at sort of an inflection point where you've got a very passionate fan base that wants to see them succeed and win. And so when you talk about getting whelmed by a coaching hire, what does that signal for free agency? It's a move forward, business when it comes to appeasing the fans. And if you're Kyle Davidson, you're sitting there right now, and we're sitting here talking about the reasons that Jeff Blashill's, here I am playing devil's advocate. Sorry, Ron. If we're allowed to sit here and go, Jeff Blashill can whelm us, but we're going to be okay with it, and we're going to give him time, and we're going to be okay, riding out a year or two. Well, that's just taking Kyle Davidson. If I'm Kyle Davidson, I'm sitting there going, goalpost just moved another year. What can I do next year? Oh, I'm going to miss on Mitch Marner this free agency because Jeff Blashill's a first-year coach. All right, goalpost another year. Let's kick it down the road. Let's keep kicking it down the road. Where does the accountability side come in and everybody say, this is what we need to do? Ron, we're both season ticket holders. We both go to these games. We know what the attendance looks like. I enjoy going to Blackhawks games, but at what point do you take that next step forward? And I think that that's the biggest challenge in trying to define something, because you have an organization, as Steve said, that's a business that doesn't want to push things forward too fast because that puts accountability on the people in charge. Where does that fall?
Yeah. I mean,
there's got to be a happy balance there.
Sure, there's got to be a happy balance, but I think fuck it. We're already at this point. Let's dive down the rabbit hole here really quick. If we're going to sit here and say, well, where's the pressure? Where's the pressure? Well, if you look at all the other teams in the city, none of them have used the dreaded R word. Nobody's talked about rebuilding, right? Nobody's talked about burning it to the ground and being true about it. The last time that happened in the city, it was the Chicago Cubs and Theo Epstein. And they said, we're going to burn it to the ground and good things are going to happen. And that's what happened.
Are you forgetting that the White Sox are in rebuild 3.0 right now?
I don't count Jerry Reinsdorf-owned organizations, Tony. Remember, inferior. I don't count them. They don't count toward this discussion. So the last time a team was honest, patience was given. And I think that's what happened. That's what's happened with the Blackhawks. They came out and said, we're going to tear this bitch down to the studs. You got to bear with us here. Davidson was very clear about that from day one. And we're only this will be going into year 4. With one of those was a total strip down year. And then you win the lottery really early with Bedard, and then you start to build back up. They kind of were still stripping down even after they got Bedard in a lot of ways. Now they're starting to burn, kind of take it and burn back up. And I think for that reason, there's no, it's very easy to say, well, okay, it's year 4. It's coach number 2. I think the pressure starts to come, but I think the pressure starts to come probably next season with a little bit of expectation of okay, Kyle, you told us you were going to be better this past year and it didn't really happen. Now we really need to see it. Otherwise, people are going to start to get irrationally impatient with your plan and your timeline.
Yeah. And to kind of just give the other side of my viewpoint, because I tend to be pretty cynical on my outlook towards things. So I think what you just said, Ron, is that's very valid. I think the fact that there is patience is kind of key to this whole thing, because you don't want a GM that's going to flip-flop on their plan, because once you tear down the whole thing to the studs, there's no going back. And then Blackhawks fans have kind of seen that already when Bowman said that we're going to rebuild. And then next thing you know, we got Seth Jones and Fleury, and now we're back to square one. So I think there is something to be said where we do have to be patient with this thing. And the fact that Davidson is sticking to his guns on his plan, taking his time, I think that's key. And that's going to be key going into the offseason too, because Tony, like you were saying with Mitch Marner, Mitch Marner, he's the one that gets to pick which team to go to. And if the Blackhawks don't really see him being
never get up for the letdown.
I don't want Marner anyway.
I'm a Marner guy. I would love to have him. But
hey, Ron, can you say that one more time and just say, hey, Matt Voodoo? You know Voodoo. He really wants Marner. He's been in my text messages. Please let him know that you don't want Marner either.
I don't want Marner.
Matt, I want Marner, but
that's a whole other topic for a whole nother show. We'll debate that before July 1st. But continue, Steve.
I guess like what I'm trying to say is like be patient with what's going on for fans that are getting mad. I think it's like I love being critical with this team and picking apart every little decision, but there is a section of the fan base where they're really tearing down like what's happening a little too far. But I don't know. Maybe that's another discussion for another time, but just be patient.
Yeah, I completely agree. Gentlemen, I do want to kind of wind us down here because we do have another topic that is important that we want to get to, and we are into Friday. Happy Friday to everybody still tuning in with us here. We need to, still talk about a lottery. So final thoughts here on just Blashill reactions. I think a Blashill check-in is healthy throughout the course of the offseason. So we'll have like a little therapy hour not hour, but therapy 5 minutes on every show of like, how do we feel about Jeff Blashill today? But overall, it's only not even 24 hours fresh in terms of official yet. Final thoughts that you haven't touched on to this point. Tony, you can have the floor first.
I was hoping you'd go to Steve, but I'll gladly take the microphone for a minute here. I feel that I've done a couple of these coaching hire shows over the tenure of On Tap Sportsnet's Four Feathers podcast, even before it was On Tap Sportsnet. Ron.
Even before it was On Tap Sportsnet, yeah.
So I feel like we've done this before, and I still go back and think about how I felt when Jeremy Colleton was named the head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks and how dark that day was for me. It was like one of the most terrible days of my life. Like I can count on one hand terrible days in Tony Marchese's life, and the day that Jeremy Colleton was named head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks is probably up there. It might be like number 5, but I digress. This doesn't feel like the end of the world to me. I think Ron said something earlier that, at worst, it's a 2-year thing and we'll survive it. I watched a lot of pressers from Blashill in his time with the Red Wings the other night. And one thing that I gathered was that he wasn't afraid to sort of throw some players under the bus and demand accountability. And I don't think that that's going to be the worst thing for this Chicago Blackhawks team. Not that that's always the best way to go about doing business and airing, dirty laundry publicly or, putting players in a bad situation. However, I feel that over the past couple of seasons, there's things that the average fan watches on their television screen night in and night out that you just want to be addressed. And, maybe the media doesn't ask about certain plays or, how the team was performing in a certain period or things that you felt that was critical within a game. What I gathered from Blashill was that he's not going to shy away from talking about what went wrong. And transparency to the fan, I think, is something that's really awesome. And it helps you understand the game more as a fan and what's going on within the locker room, what's going on the bench, and how they're trying to attack a certain game. And I feel like sports these days lack a lot of that accountability. Everybody wants to close the door. Everybody wants to, keep things hush hush. And for whatever reason that is, maybe it's scouting, maybe it's, just PR standpoint. At least in Blashill's last tenure as a head coach in his media availabilities, I didn't see that. Now it's a different day and age. I hope he brings that to the table because I'd like to know if he was calling certain, schemes and whatnot, or plays or, different things that people didn't execute on, because I think this group of players would benefit from someone that is more of a hard-nosed coach and demands accountability. I didn't really see that for a while. I think this is a total tone change direction. That's my biggest positive from the Jeff Blashill hire.
I think
We'll
it's
see if it
interesting.
happens.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that because Chris Chelios made the comment that he got better probably with his accountability being around Cooper, where, there was some backlash for a lot of what sometimes throwing guys under the bus. Kind of learning some of that being 3 years under Cooper's bench is certainly something that can help him there. Steve, your thoughts?
For Blashill, as kind of questionable I am about how he's going to be running things, I'm actually a little excited to see how this goes. I'm not going to say excited as if this was like me looking forward to Connor Bedard's first game in the NHL excited, but just excited to see what happens. What I'm more curious about is the assistant coaches. I kind of want to look more into the background of the names that were brought on, but those are going to be the coaches that have a more impact on the X's and O's, where we're going to see a lot of Blashill just as a leadership figure. So I'm excited to see what he does bring to the table this go around. He is older. He's had some time away from being a head coach, and I think a huge thing is he's been underneath Cooper for the last 3 years, and that's pretty massive. But for me, I want to kind of see how his assistant coaches are going to be working with him.
Yeah, a great point as well. Just to back that up once again, because we did touch on it a little bit early, and then we're very Jeff Blashill focused. But obviously, Blashill being the new head coach, Sorensen is going to be an assistant coach, which makes me kind of LOL because this is exactly what happened with Derek King when he was interim and then gets a spot on the bench type thing. Maybe that's just the Blackhawks thing. I don't know. But then again, Michael Pekka joins as an assistant from his days with the Rangers. Also played in the NHL. He was I believe he was a team captain at one point. Was a center in the NHL. And then the other assistant coach is still to be named, but the belief is that Mike Bellucci, who was coming from Pittsburgh with Sullivan's staff, might be the other guy as the assistant. So again, still a name to be announced. So there is still some kind of intrigue of who does get the last one, even if it is Bellucci as indicated here. But we'll have to, go from there and figure that out. Steve, you had one more thing for us?
I did.
I think that was Tony. I'm good.
Oh, go ahead.
I did. I forgot this because this isn't our standard format, but this would have been my sort of ruffle some feathers take. But I think as we're closing down the Blashill talk, I've got to go here. I've been doing a lot of research on Chicago coaches and how they perform in the Chicagoland market. This dates back a long ways, and I have an evaluation metric on coaches, and it's their facial hair game and whether or not they're going to be successful in Chicago coaching. And if I do have one thing to say, this is probably Jeff Blashill's biggest mark against him, is that I don't see a lot of pictures out there with strong facial hair game. And that doesn't typically lend well to long-term success in the city of Chicago. I believe the Chicago coach facial hair tracker is available at Tony on Tap. If you want to go find it, we'll figure out if Jeff Blashill can break the trend or if he will wind up in Tony's thread of unsuccessful Chicago coaches based on his lack of facial hair. There's still time, Jeff. If you're listening to this, I suggest, maybe rubbing your mustache area a little bit, try and stir up those hair follicles, get some things going. There's time between now and October to be rocking like a full Steve stash. You can do it. We know you can. Just try to throw some stuff out there. If you want to be successful, get the facial hair game going. It might be beneficial to you. So that was my actual final thought.
I like it. Somewhere between a mustache and a full beard could do wonders for Jeff Blashill's
Hey,
future.
the full beard, bald head looks really good on some guys. Some guys.
Anders Sorensen,
beard with
kind of a balding head.
Interim, he doesn't apply.
Yeah, interim, but he's now an assistant, so still some of that facial hair game remains on the bench nonetheless.
I can't wait for the day that they fire Blashill and promote Sorensen to interim too.
I mean, if we're being honest, had Sorensen gotten the job, that would have felt like Blashill for the first time, kind of coming up from Rockford. Would have felt like Colleton a little bit too there, Tone, if Sorensen got it. So you were comfortable with that. You were almost comfortable with your arch nemesis.
They almost talked me into it. It was dark times over here. That's why we haven't been on for a month.
Tony's had a rough time at it. The White Sox are currently poisoning his brain with bad sports. Sorry, buddy. Can't help you there. At least Steve's at least far enough away from it where he can tune it out a little bit more with better blinders. You're just shit out of luck right in the middle of all of it.
I'm right in the thick of it.
Right in the thick of it. I have nothing else to add. Mine is just I'm going to continue to be curious, and you're probably going to see a lot of weird shit from my voice, and whether that's via article or via content or whatever, just kind of on this as it approaches and whatnot. But we do have to talk about the draft lottery, and that's going to be our last thought for this show. We did not get to do a formal show after the fact. So be it. We got to stew on it a little bit and kind of get a pulse for the fan base, how people feel about the pick too, I think. The Blackhawks get the 3rd overall pick. Sharks moved back to spot. They got the 2nd pick. So they technically won a lottery pick. The Islanders coming out of absolute left field and getting the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft. A lot of people are concerned Michael Misa might not be there at 3. I've seen trade up ideas to get to 1 to take Misa. I've seen trade back ideas to number 9 to get JJ Paterka and other things from the Buffalo Sabres. I've seen a lot of crazy, weird shit from the pulse of the fan base. People like Hagens, people like Misa, people like Martone, people like all different kinds of guys. We're not going to get into the names and the who we think they're going to take, but just what do we think about the Blackhawks picking at 3 in this year's draft? And do you think, I'll say this, we'll cap our player level discussion of the who's here. Do you think it changes their draft strategy from what the original draft strategy was, assuming they stayed at 2, which I think was overwhelmingly Michael Misa? Do you think that changes now, or do you think the plan can still be on schedule? Steve, what's the pulse on the Blackhawks getting the 3rd overall pick in your mind?
I think they're probably just going to stick to their plan of kind of who they wanted to look at. Just looking at people's lists, shit's changing all the time. So, like, Misa's at 2 one day, and then the next day, the Sharks are looking at getting Martone. And so who the hell knows? I think the Blackhawks are going to stick to their path of what they want, and they're going to confidently make their decision.
I like that. Tony, any differing opinion, or are you and Steve on the same wavelength?
Sort of a differing opinion. I firmly believe that Misa was probably the pick at 2 had they stayed there. We did a pre-lottery show. We sort of gave our takes on what we wanted, or at least predictions. I don't know if we did a show on it, but I know we tweeted it out. I was trying to will the number 1 into existence. You guys nailed it. Nailed it. So kudos to you.
GM Ron and GM Steve over here, right?
Yeah, because in my boat, anything outside of 1 and 2 was going to sort of be a crapshoot with this draft and potentially sort of hamstring the plans of what was going to take place. Now, I didn't foresee New York jumping up there, so there's obviously a hometown player that was widely regarded as potential number 1 before this season took place that could wind up going to New York. And then all of a sudden the draft resets and it's just normal again. I think it puts Kyle Davidson in a tough spot. I would be okay with trading up. I would be okay with trading down. I'd be okay with taking the best player available at number 3, whoever is there. That's dangerous because there's so many options. And I feel like anytime a GM has way too many options, that just makes things more difficult. So my thought is like, it's okay, but this wasn't the best draft class. It really, that's more reflective on the draft class more than anything. And is it the worst thing that you didn't get the number 1 pick? Probably not either. So, it is what it is.
You're kind of just meh. Yeah.
I'm really meh on it.
Are you whelmed? Are you whelmed about the Hawks?
I'm whelmed with this too. I'm whelmed with this. I mean, if it was one or two, like I'd have a definitive thought process here.
Sure.
But I feel like there's such a sort of a drop off unless things potentially go one specific way in terms of combination of players taken. And that's the way that leaves Misa available at 3. I think if Misa's gone in 1-2, I think you could see a last minute snap decision from Kyle Davidson that goes and potentially changes the way that things work. And hopefully he makes the right decision. I didn't want that pressure for Kyle Davidson. I wanted it to be a little bit more clear cut.
Yeah.
I think 3 puts him in probably the worst position you could probably be in for having as bad of a season. I mean, 4 would have been worse, but at least at 4, like, you know that you're probably going to try and move off of that pick. If you can't get your guy at 3 and you don't know really what's going to take place there, I think it puts you at a disadvantage because you can't proactively make a move. You have to react to the situation in front of you.
I don't think it's
a poker game.
I don't think the NHL has the same movement levels that like the NFL does. I think all of us thinking the Hawks are going to move off the 3rd pick, something really crazy has to happen. That hasn't happened in a long time. The last time I can remember a team moving off of a top 10 pick was Corey Schneider going to the New Jersey Devils and the Canucks taking Bill Horvat. And that was 10 years ago almost, pretty close to it. It's been a while. So a lot of teams just stay put and take the best player available or who's their guy, right? I think Davidson's going to have a couple of guys that he likes, and they're just going to go for it. I think the 3rd pick makes it a little more interesting. I think it would have been very boring if they got number 2 because I think we all had a feeling. But let's be real. There's a chance that they do something really crazy and really odd and really weird, and they go a player that we're not expecting to see either. So I don't think I have an opinion on who they're going to take, but I'm going to save it for later shows when we talk about draft picks. But I'm very set on this, and maybe it's my tinfoil hat take, but I think the player that the Blackhawks are going to take is a guy that nobody's talking about. So that's all I'm going to say. That's where I'm going to leave you.
The last time you said that, we wound up with Kirby Doc.
You're damn right, because I said they would get Kirby Doc. GM Ron Stradamus over here, okay? I got a Ron Stradamus thought on this one, and I feel really good about it, but I'm going to hold on to it for a couple more shows. Gentlemen, this is a fun one, man. We have run well into Friday morning. So with that in mind, I do want to encourage everybody, head over to the Four Feathers podcast, wherever you have socials, and especially wherever you listen, like, subscribe, leave us a review. You know the good drill on all the podcast platforms. And then, of course, on socials, follow along at Four Feathers Pod. Steve, you have assumed fun control as well of yes, we do need Ron Stradamus t-shirts. I'll even put the genie headpiece on.
I'll make it happen.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Just put a Domino's pizza box in my hands too instead of a crystal ball. Important little detail there. Yeah, important little detail there. But be sure to follow along at Four Feathers Pod. Steve is crushing it over on the Instagram. It's a great follow. It was a little inactive for a while. Tony and I will take full responsibility of that. But the creative and Steve is handling that bad boy. As always, Four Feathers Pod on X as well. Be sure to follow all of us. You see our handles here. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, hit the bell button on Tap Sports and on the YouTube. And you guys know the drill. We got Bears, we've got Bulls. We talked about all the other Chicago teams tonight in this discussion, and you got both baseball teams as well. These guys like the Southsiders. They can all go be miserable over at Sox on Tap. But if you like the Cubs and you want to have a lot of fun, you can join me and all the boys over at Cubs on Tap, and follow your favorite baseball team for the rest of the summer. OnTapSportsNet.com. Head on Tap Sports on the socials, the On Tap Sports Network. Go check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Gentlemen, this was an absolute blast. Great discussion. Jeff Blashill, officially the 42nd head coach of your Chicago Blackhawks. We'll have plenty more coming. Draft preview shows, who we like, who we don't like. I'm sure we'll get into all the good fun. Free agency, my Christmas morning, July 1st is quickly approaching. We're going to have a good one this offseason. And a lot can happen between now and then We've got Bears, Bulls, Hawks, late nudity, and the Cubs and their tourist fans. Yeah, you White Sox fans are the absolute worst. You're all miserable. Anyway, gentlemen, what do you say? We get out here and let's go Hawks?
Let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.